You're listening to episode 3 of The Thunderclap.
The St. Luke's student-produced podcast taking over earbuds all over the hilltop.
Once hailed as great equalizers, standardized tests like the SAT and AP tests have now been called into question. Although they offer indisputable benefits in the college admissions process, AP classes in particular are now being seen as restrictive to the learning process, as teachers are forced to teach to a test rather than actually mirroring the content and structure of a college course. In response to these sentiments, St. Luke's has joined the growing list of secondary schools to move beyond AP courses, replacing them with new advanced curricula. To better understand the decision-making process behind these new changes, as well as how they will be implemented, we sat down with the head of the upper school, Liz Perry.
So I'm Liz Perry, and I'm the head of upper school here at St. Luke's.
And we have you here today to talk a little bit about this new decision that's sort of been, the talk of the school, so to speak, for the past couple of weeks, the decision to move away from pretty much all of the AP classes at this school. So first, I think as someone who's probably been involved in pretty much the discussion from the outset, would you mind giving us just a brief overview of what actually is going to happen with the school, what's going away, what's happening, and then we can dive into specifics.
So first let me say I'm thrilled to hear that it may be the talk of the school because if that means kids are sitting around discussing the values of advanced curriculum, then I feel like it's already a victory. So in a nutshell, we call it Beyond AP because I don't want to frame it in terms of like we're getting rid of or we're losing or replacing. Right. There's so much value to an AP program, and I think it's served our school and our students really well for decades, more than 30 years. And anytime you have a popular and successful program, right, it might be crazy to even look at it, right? Sort of if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And I guess what I would say is that the more we looked at the ways that our AP courses were putting constraints on our curriculum, the more I was inclined to say, well, let's take a look at that. And it would pop up all over the place. It would pop up when teachers like Mr. Martin would say, it's so frustrating that kids have these deep interests in European history and I can't spend time on their questions because I have to cover the curriculum. It would pop up when Mr. Labrie, when he used to teach AP Chem, he couldn't actually use the textbook that he wanted to use because the College Board audits all the AP curriculum, and that was not one of their approved textbooks. So things like that, right? Mr. Brusco would say it's really aggravating that students have to handwrite their code in a computer science class. And so when I'm hearing from those teachers who I trust so much, who are so well regarded in our community, who are scholars in their fields, and they're saying to me, I want to do more. Yeah. I can design a more interesting, more intellectually rigorous, more creative class that honestly will be much more like an actual college course. Then you start to say, well, I believe that would be good for kids and for teaching and learning. But the question on everyone's mind, would it hurt kids in the college admissions process? Because we could have the most innovative, interesting curriculum in the world, and if selective colleges don't view it that way, then we're not doing a service to our students. So then we went back and really looked at that. And I can go into a lot more detail on that, but I'll just say the answer is a resounding, not only will it not hurt students in college admissions, but we actually believe it will help them.
You've been listening to The Thunderclap, the St. Luke's student-produced podcast taking over earbuds all over the hilltop.
So what's happening is we've gradually, as we had the opportunity over the last year or two, just quietly moved beyond APs in some areas. So when Mark Bisson retired, he used to teach the AP language and composition class in the English department. And instead of having a new member of the department teach it, we asked Mr. Flaxbart to create it. He created Honors Contemporary Fiction, which has been really well subscribed and super popular. AP Euro, same thing. AP Euro was known as a little bit of a grind, so much so that students honestly weren't signing up for it, even though it's Mr. Martin. It's the thing he literally got his PhD in. And they weren't signing up for it in big numbers. And so we tried to reimagine that course.
So this has been in the works for a while.
AP Latin, right, is this year running as Advanced Latin because we felt like we had 3 really, really strong students who essentially Magistra said, I would love to do this new curriculum with these kids. So we've taken those, AP Music Theory, the same thing, right? We've taken those opportunities where we had them, and then we really took a look at, are there any APs that are actually really serving our students well? And in the end, we felt that calculus at the AB and BC level and French and Spanish are serving our students well, and I can tell you more about that. But all the others over the next 2 years will gradually go away, and our advanced courses will replace them.
If you're an SLS student interested in videography, podcasting, and journalism, be sure to join the Eye of the Storm Club.
Well, you mentioned AP Lang and the Advanced Euro, which is interesting to me because those classes, I mean, since I've been here, Lang hasn't, I don't think, been an option as far as I've been aware. Mm-hmm. So this has been in the works for a while, it seems like. When did teachers first start bringing this to you as an issue? When did you guys first start discussing this? Yeah,
so actually 7 years ago when I was interviewing for this position, it came up in my interviews.
Really?
Yeah.
My goodness. What was your opinion of it then?
So I came from a school, before I worked at St. Luke's, I worked at a school in Brooklyn called the Berkeley Carroll School, and I had actually just led a process to move beyond APs at that school.
Gotcha.
And that school was the first in its peer group to do that. And this was 10 years ago, and I will say 10 years ago it was different. It was seen as more maybe risky or more pioneering, and we knew it was the right thing for kids. But there were also fewer examples we could point to of other schools that had done it successfully. A decade later, so many schools have done this. And, I don't mean to name drop. There are a lot of great schools that have done this that maybe aren't as famous. But, when people say, how can St. Luke's do this? I'm like, Choate did this, right? Like, this isn't some super fringy, cutting edge, radical. This is now pretty mainstream in what I would call highly selective independent high schools.
It seems like the direction that everyone's moving. It just depends on when you jump, so to speak.
And I will say a lot of it depends on your faculty. And I go back to that. When I came into this role 7 years ago, I mean, first of all, I was new. You don't want to come in new and just change everything.
Right.
But also I needed to really evaluate with a team, not just myself, but with a team that I needed, what does our director of college counseling think? What does our own director of admissions think, right? If Jenny Bachman says, this sounds great, but I don't think people are going to choose our school if we don't have APs, well, that's a problem. Okay?
Yes,
so
definitely.
We really needed to sit together for several years, really, and look at, it's not so much getting rid of APs as asking, do we have faculty who can build the courses in every single department that will actually be better than the existing courses? And if the answer to that is no, then carry on.
Yeah.
Right? So I will say, I think, to me, it's a huge compliment to the St. Luke's faculty that we can say with total confidence, every single class, I can tell you the new class is going to be better. Now, I say that, we're still teaching APs for another year, so it's not like people are getting bad classes. But they are classes that have constraints, and I think we talked a lot about the timing of this. I was, just to be fully transparent, much more full steam ahead, rip the Band-Aid off, let's announce now, this is the last year. And other people felt like, no, if we should delay, we should announce that in 5 years we're doing this so that everyone who's in the high school now has the program, quote, that they signed up for. Well, that also seems crazy.
Interesting.
Like, who even knows what 5 years is going to be like, right? Will these same teachers even be still working here? So many questions. So we went back and forth. And in the end, I was really persuaded by the argument that 11th grade is stressful enough without juniors feeling like we just changed the whole game on them in the middle of it. And so that's why we decided not next year, but the following year.
That's so interesting. So you sort of have been alluding to this, but obviously there had to be a team that makes this decision. Mm-hmm. You mentioned college counseling, you mentioned admissions. Who are who are the other people that you worked with? And then I'm also curious, and you sort of alluded to this, but who are those people? I'm sure throughout the process, some people were, very gung-ho, some people were pushing back. You don't obviously have to name names, but did you experience those moments where you had to really convince someone or someone was convincing you the other way?
Absolutely.
Those moments of sway?
Yeah, absolutely. So the team that we put together, as you said, Ms. Bell, Ms. Bachman, Mr. Yavanditti, obviously Director of Studies, sort of has to have a hand in anything that has to do with changes in our curriculum. And then I wanted 2 experienced AP teachers who would bring that classroom perspective. So I asked Mr. Martin and Mr. Labrie to be on that committee. And then we also had Nancy Traeger, who's our Director of Marketing and Communications, not as a decision maker, but more so that when we got to the end of the process, she would really understand it from the inside out, as opposed to I would just send her an email being like, hey, we're doing this thing. Can you communicate it? Right? Which is not a great way.
We're changing the whole curriculum.
Exactly.
Can you tell everyone?
Exactly. So, and they've been actually really wonderful in helping us think about how to communicate this message in a way that, because it could be really scary. And I understand that. And no one wants to feel like their education or their child is a guinea pig or some experimental thing. And yet at the same time, schools cannot stay the same, right? They can't just stay the same forever. We change things about St. Luke's every year, and this is a bigger change. And so we're communicating it more deliberately. And I would say it was really helpful to have Nancy on that team.
That makes a lot of sense.
Got something to say, but don't want to be on camera? The Thunderclap podcast is for you. Email Elise Kim to find out more.
Have you gotten to hear at all about reactions from parents, from students? Have you gotten that feedback?
Yeah, we've gotten more response from parents than from students, maybe because we've more intentionally invited it. So we sent a letter out to the community, and we built a new section of the website about advanced curriculum with some FAQs. And when we shared that with the community, we also set up 8 different opportunities. We called them curriculum conversations, when parents could sign up to come in and meet with Mr. Yavanditti, Ms. Bell, and me together. And we did that because there are parents that don't hesitate to call me when they have a concern about something, but most parents, it's kind of a high bar. Like, you have to be pretty worried or upset about something to call the head of upper school.
Right.
And I didn't want people that maybe had small questions, or they were like, I trust you, I support you, but I'm still a little nervous about the college piece. Like, that person's not going to make an appointment, and I wanted that person to feel really welcome and comfortable to come in and get their questions answered. I think it's one thing to read something on a website, and it's another thing to actually hear Sonia Bell look you in the eye and say, let me tell you some stories and explain to you why I think APs don't always serve our kids as well as they could in the college admissions process. And I think that face-to-face human conversation is so valuable. I joke that Jim Yavanditti and I were almost unnecessary in those meetings because I would say 80 to 90% of the questions were about college. And if I were to sum up the parent reaction in those 8 different curriculum conversations, it would be something like, this sounds really good. I think the classes you're describing sound great. The teachers are awesome. And I think my kid's going to have a great experience. Are you 100% sure it won't hurt them in college? And so then we spend all our time on that, which I understand. Yeah. Also, especially parents who haven't been through the college process. Mm-hmm. If you have a 7th grader, a lot of your information about the college process is based on your own experience, maybe 20 years ago or more, and honestly, sort of fear and myth. And in the popular imagination, APs are everything. You have to take APs to get into college. Like, actually, you don't.
Yeah.
You need to take a demanding program. You need to demonstrate that you made the most of the opportunities available to you in your school.
Yeah.
But if there's not an AP statistics course and what you took instead was Corliss Spencer's advanced statistics, there's no penalty for that. And in fact, I would argue it's an advantage because AP Stats just makes you look like every other student that got a 5 on the AP Stats exam. whereas Corliss's letter of recommendation will be able to talk about this interesting project you did with statistical modeling and software. Again, the College Board not big on computer use. You don't use any statistical software in that course, whereas in a real college course on statistics, you would. So that's more distinctive. It gives kids something different to talk about in an interview.
Yeah.
It gives Corliss something different to write about in a letter. It gives Ms. Bell and Mr. Vesseledge something to write about in their letter that is different from what everyone else is doing.
And again, not to name drop Choate or some of those other schools, but those students are all getting into college.
They are all getting into college.
So if that was an issue, then I'm sure those schools would have gone back beforehand.
Yeah, and it's worth saying not a single school that has moved beyond APs has gone back.
Are you a St. Luke's student or faculty member with a special talent that needs to be shared with the world? Contact the Eye of the Storm team and we'll make a podcast or video to showcase your awesomeness.
So we really, I think, pulled the team in opposite directions in a good way. And one of the things that was really helpful, the two of us and Mr. Martin actually went and spent the day at Miss Porter's because I was interested in their model, which was a model that Miss Bell had sort of been advocating. But to be honest, I was not really listening to her because I was like, no, we're going to do this. And she kept saying, why don't we look at what Miss Porter's did? And they did not do an all or nothing. And that's how I had originally conceived of this. Either we're going to keep APs or we're going to move beyond APs. And at Miss Porter's, they moved beyond a lot of APs and they kept a few. And I was skeptical about that. It seemed confusing to me, like why those
if they're
and
bad,
not others.
they're bad.
Right, exactly. And really visiting Miss Porter's and seeing the way they had done that helped me to imagine that we could keep the ones that were still working. And, you know, I mean, as much as it breaks my heart that students use their 5s in AP French to wave out of a language and never take French again in college, I also hear from alums that's actually very useful.
Yeah.
And, you know, the same with calculus, right? That it, especially kids who are going to schools of engineering, we have a lot of students applying in STEM, and that really does simulate a college level calculus class. And so keeping those and moving beyond the others was ultimately, it was a decision that we wouldn't have landed on had the team just all deferred to me from the beginning. So
That's really interesting about that process.
Yeah.
Those were all the questions that I had. That's
Okay.
really fascinating. But thank you so much for sitting down with me. I really appreciate it.
You're so welcome. Thanks for asking.
As Ms. Perry said, the advanced course curriculum has already started to be implemented. To get a student's thoughts on the program, we interviewed senior Brody Menzies.
My name's Brody Menzies. I am a senior at St. Luke's. I've been here since 5th grade.
And we have you here today because you are one of the first people to take some of the advanced classes, the new advanced curriculum for the school. So which advanced class are you taking?
So I'm actually in advanced European history as well as the advanced music theory class.
So can you tell us a little bit about your experience, what those differences are between the AP and the advanced?
Yeah, of course. So advanced, especially in Euro, is much more focused on, less teaching to the test, but more focusing on interesting sources, focusing on more, like long form writing. So one of the added benefits that we have in in advanced versus AP is that about once every 2 weeks or so, we actually meet as a separate unit, the advanced class, and we specifically go over an article or, some sort of scholarly source that Mr. Martin has found interesting. Then we have a discussion where it's just our class, conversing about that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Do you ever regret taking advanced versus AP? Or are you happy with your choice?
I'm happy with my choice. Definitely. I think.
You get to see a lot of what the AP students are doing, right?
Yeah, there's a lot going on in
all of the
AP. One of the biggest differences between AP and advanced, other than the fact that the advanced kids don't take the test at the end of the year, is that AP students do have regular tests throughout the year. So, AP students, probably once every 2 weeks when we're having our conversation, they're preparing for a test, which is, multiple choice and short answer. And at the same time, we're, working on longer form writing. So we actually work on a term paper, which the AP students don't do.
Awesome. Do you feel like you have because you get to do those longer form writings, that deeper dive, do you feel like you have a better understanding of the history than maybe your previous history classes or even the AP class? Do you see those differences?
Definitely. I think with the advanced, you just get much more of an opportunity to dive into specific things that you're interested in. So whereas, something may be, a sentence or two or a short little footnote on something, that's where we kind of like flourish. We dive into that. So one of the examples of what we read about is, when we were talking about religious reform in medieval Europe, we talked about very briefly kind of like the changing and the reform in nunneries and monasteries. And so for one of our short readings, we really dived into the topic of mass demonic possession within monasteries. And we spent a whole class period talking about this one reading of 30 pages or so. And it was one of the most fascinating sources. Like it's, nothing you've ever been taught before.
And
so that's
definitely
just,
not on the AP test.
Probably not, no.
I'd be surprised. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Were you concerned at all? I know a lot of people right now, especially parents, are concerned about taking AP versus advanced. What is it going to do to college applications? Were you nervous about that? Did you talk to people about that?
Well, first it was a matter of, again, I didn't really know that much about it. But then as I talked it through with Mr. Martin was very, he was sure to say that if you take advanced versus AP, there's not going to be a difference. Whoever your college counselor will be, Ms. Bell or Mr. Veslige, they're going to make sure that colleges know that, they're equally rigorous courses. And in taking Euro, it's a rigorous course no matter what you do. We're doing different things, obviously.
Right.
And I think from maybe a face value, AP appears more stressful just because of the rigor of some of the testing that goes on. But I would say that, advanced Euro is equally as rigorous. You are doing more, intellectually challenging things and, the term paper writing and the discussions you're having, stuff like that.
It's probably more like what you'd see at a college setting than
definitely
multiple choice tests.
And he's definitely preparing. In either class, you're getting that preparation for, some of the short form writing that still does happen in college. We still do in the advanced class, do the, LEQs and DBQs that the AP class is doing.
All that fun stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So we're still getting that experience in timed writing that in college will be something that's useful to us.
Yeah. Do you have any advice for people coming into the advanced classes? How to prepare yourself?
Generally, I'd say, I think the classes are different in scope. It depends what your interests are. If you're interested in, writing and reading, and really getting more of a, focusing on the little like cultural moments that happen, then I would say the advanced course really is for you. If you're interested in really getting a very broad view of European history, then the AP course is for you. Not that the advanced course doesn't give you that broad view, but the advanced course really gets into the nitty-gritty and the specifics of each cultural movement.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much. Thanks for being
here.
Thank you.
No problem.
Well, thank you everybody for listening to this episode of the Thunderclap. It's brought to you by me, Cate Mathews, Elise Kim and Mr. Fendelman, and the entire Teach Tech team helping to produce and record from behind the scenes. This episode was edited by Brian Douglas, and we want to give a special thanks to Miss Perry and Brody Menzies for coming on the show. Stay tuned for future episodes.